can solidly say no. I don't think that would be healthy. I don't think it's a binary thing. I think for me, survival is inherent in every risk I take. Survival is going to come back in quiet voices that I didn't even know that I still recognized or that were still speaking. So absolutely, when I say I'm thriving, I don't mean I've got everything together and I don't have moments of absolute paralyzing fear or just I still have that sense of I'm less than. Absolutely. But I think for me, honestly, I finally got to a point where I never got here until my mid 50s, where I just want to find my people. And if I'm not someone's people anymore, I am okay with that for the first time in my life. So I don't need to craft something to get a wider circle. And I think for me, whether it's trauma, whether it's depression or anything else, I think that is really, really crucial. And I think even if you have days, and I had one last week where literally the voices were so loud, I felt like other people in the room could hear them. Like it's just, wow, do I have to push that down? Or when you make a mistake and you immediately say, I'm still that person. And you just go, but wait a minute. No, you've done a lot of work. You're not that same person. You're not image crafting. But sometimes when you get uncomfortable, you do duck into these kinds of things that were mechanisms. Yeah. So yeah, like I love the idea that we are thriving the minute we understand that survival is also a part of thriving.
Yes, right. Exactly. I mean, it's there for a reason. It's there for a reason, but we get to choose how we're going to respond. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel with Sharon Land. I'm so excited, as always, to be having these discussions and a continued conversation on the series of Surviving to Thriving. And what better person than my dear friend and sister, Kimie Pearle, who is started and founder of Worth the War. Kimie and I have known each other for several years. We met through social media, Instagram, and we have since then found our way traversing onto YouTube and Clubhouse and all of these other amazing platforms and really cross-pollinating so much with our own messages and what our own heart's work is. So I cannot wait to have this conversation today with you, Kimie, and I welcome you and thank you so much for being here.
Sharon, I am so honored to get to be here as you relaunch your YouTube podcast. I know there's going to be lots of people who are going to learn a lot of ways and practical ways to actually heal and find their path to thriving. So I'm excited to be a part of it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, and it's such an honor, and it's really my pleasure to have you. And one of the things that I say is I love to help people to glow from the inside out, and that's really one of the things that I feel that you do so well. And I see you doing this with others as well, and you do it in your own very unique, beautiful Kimie way, with your such a wonderful heart-centered and heart-focused and forward movement. So, I mean, I'd love to hear a little bit more about Worth the War and how that came to be. And then I wanted to, roll into the topic of, surviving to thriving and what that means to you. So tell me about Worth the War. When did it start?
I would love to share about this because it's become my passion. And I think every passion usually has a rollout to other people. And it's sometimes it switches over from being our own pain and suffering to being really about other people. And that's where we are now. And that's a really great place to be. And I love interacting with other people who see that bigger picture like you do and like so many of the people in your circle do. And I think that the whole idea is to bring that circle fuller and bigger, to bring more people into kind of seeing the inner workings of how we take our pain and suffering and we make it something that we can give as a gift. And it's really not about us at that point. And I love that aspect. I'm not really comfortable with things being too much about me, believe it or not, even though I'm on social media. And so it's a nice place to be. Worth the War comes out of, as many passions do, great suffering. And what we're trying to do at Worth the War in building a community, we're on 5 platforms now, is to basically rethink our approach to love and relationship by sparing hearts. And that sounds so trite and cliche, but really it's about preventing abuse. And through the journey of suffering, I saw so much great material on trauma and suffering and abuse and narcissistic abuse. There's lots of it. It's great. We need it. I think we need new voices on it. I'm not saying that that's something that's oversaturated, but I found that my heart really resonated with the idea that we're handing the same culture down to the hearts that are following us. And how do we stop that? How do we put a roadblock between the mindset of love and relationship and the next generations, as well as healing our own journeys and our own hearts? So it's kind of a multifaceted, and sometimes that makes it harder because it really does hit all of the facets. But I think the tagline that I think of is just rethinking the way we approach it. So rethinking love. So that's where we are right now. We are kind of in the cusp of creating now materials to help people do this rethinking. So we're kind of sitting on the edge of that, moving in.
Oh my gosh. So much of what you just said, I'm like pulling it apart in my mind and wanting to speak into. But yeah, I think it's so especially important to be able to realize that it's not just something that we've experienced, but what we're experiencing is a reflection of what is for the collective and for the community. And so if we can take that and work through it and heal it ourselves, then we have a greater opportunity to be able to help others and to serve others. And another aspect of where that helps to serve is it helps to break generational trauma and ancestral trauma, which is something that is a great passion of mine. It's a heart project of mine. And so, so you're doing that. And so when you say spare the younger hearts and the little hearts behind us, you really are, it's a very profound statement, right? It sounds, very kind of storybookish, right? Like something that we would want to read to our children. Yet we also realize that the metaphors and the parables that go along in those stories are so powerful. And so it is worth the war.
It is worth the war.
So, God, I love that. And really speaking into the trauma aspect and that, and some of the things that go along with trauma is, narcissism and some of those personality disorders that we develop at a very, very young age because of our own traumatic experiences, which turn out to be defense mechanisms, which then in turn can really hurt other individuals, right? And as we journey on in our lives. And so to understand that it's not a name calling or a blaming, but it's just a term so we can understand what these things are and teach practical tools, which is what I'm hearing that you said, that you say that you do, is tremendous. And it's, I love what you do. I love your work and I love following you. I'm not a stalker. I swear I'm not a stalker, but I make sure that I always watch and read every single message that you have, because you're speaking into a different aspect that all of us really need to hear, and sometimes that I need to hear, right? So thank you so much for the work that you do.
No, I love doing it. And it's something that, as we talk more about surviving and thriving, it really was something born out of just trying to survive. And I love what you say about the idea of passing these things down through the generations, because I remember a moment in my childhood on a bunk bed that my sister looked at me and said, "We're stopping this here." And I was probably maybe 10. And that has impacted my entire life to say, and sometimes it created ripples that maybe didn't go as positively as you would think. And that's something that we can talk about as well. But that whole surviving piece is so important. And so when I sit down to create something, I try really hard to think about what are the things that we just don't think about that we accept, and where are those taking us in a direction that's literally wounding hearts. The numbers of IPV, are intimate partner violence, are so high, especially amongst our teen population, but the whole way across the board. So how can we use these lessons and really change the paradigm, shift it, change the conversation a little bit? So it does get born out of this idea of surviving, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that it's really important too to speak into that aspect, which I'm picturing you as a young 10-year-old, right, sitting on your bed, and that really is the metaphor of what a lot of individuals have gone through themselves, because we're not. It's our experiences many times are really truly not within our realm of being able to control, right? So being a young child and going through something, we're immediately taught, the act of survival, and that really deeply ingrained survival mechanism that is part of who we are on a biophysical level as well is activated. And so it's so important to realize that when we talk about things like trauma, and I think that it's like such a buzzword at this point, and survival mode and all of that stuff, that we realize that it really, we all have experienced it on some level, and we can be survivors. I know I'm a survivor of interpersonal violence, as well as other trauma with a capital T and a low T. Like I say, I'm like the Forrest Gump of trauma. So I just kind of wander through my life, and there it is. So, and I can laugh about it now because I spent years and years and years doing healing and getting to the point where I was able to transmute it to go from surviving to really thriving. And so I love the fact that, that is something too, that you're a beautiful, glowing example of doing the same thing. So, what say you about just all of this when it comes to talking about, survival mode and what people's perceptions are of, surviving? It can really run the gamut from denial of I'm not doing this, to this is what we have to do. Life is hard and we've just got to survive, to, seeing it as like, it's a tool. It's something that we're meant to be able to have and access, but it's also not a constant state of being. Like, where are you with all of that? And what do you say about it?
No, great question, Sharon. And I would say that I've learned some great things from your material as well, and I read them. And I think that one of the things I've learned is that when we talk about survival mode, we really need to have a clear division between our heart and our mind. I'm probably because of things I've endured in my life, which, everybody has. So I don't mean that, as a look at me, I've endured a lot. I went really cerebral because the heart part hurt. So for me, survival mode was about sticking it in my head and grinding through and making it look as seamless as possible. And what my experience with Worth the War and what created Worth the War is that I responded to trauma. And I heard something once that has stuck with me about trauma, and it helped me understand that my kids are going to have things to deal with as well, is that we never get to decide if something's a slipper or a boot. So it may feel like a slipper to us, but it felt like a boot in the chest to somebody else. So we are all walking around with certain levels of trauma, like you said, capital or little. So what I did with the things that I experienced when I felt out of control or things were just not healthy growing up is I changed the dialogue to make it about that grinding through. And I did it all up here. And the problem with that is that it had a big fallout in my life. And that fallout was I tried to do everything perfectly. I know I lied a lot in my middle years, at college, but I lied a lot because I didn't like reality. I tried to be a perfectionist. I lectured. I did all these things that were manifestations of saying, okay, I don't like the way things are, so I'm going to take control and I'm just going to do it. And it doesn't work. And where I ended up was I made my perfectionism flow into my parenthood, and I did everything right, supposedly, quotation marks. And that included knowing about development of my children, knowing about what was going to happen when they started dating, learning about the dating scene, having a very strong idea of what was going on in love and relationship, and take that as a grain of salt, right? A very strong idea. I have no idea in some ways. That ended up being to my detriment. And I would say to anybody who thinks that taking control and just grinding through and doing it all so it looks really great and everyone seems to think that you've got it together, just not a good path, because what happened was it came back and abuse found my family, and it was devastating. And it almost took me down to the point where I'm really grateful to still be here because of the mental processes that anybody can go through where they really don't want to be here anymore when you get so depressed and so struggling with mental health. I think that we need to just be open about the fact that trying to muscle through mental health, trying to muscle through depression, it didn't work for me. Certainly, I don't think it works for many people. So that falling on my face, that complete devastation netted me to the point where all I could do was go to my computer and pour the poison out. That was the beginning of what I'm doing now. It started out as poison. And as you and I both know, we really can't help people till we're healed. Not perfectly healed, not totally healed, but we can't help people till we've done the hard work of healing. So when I finally got there is when that survival mode thing just went, oh boy, was that a pile of crap. And now let's move forward to something totally different, which is I'm living. I'm just living. I'm not kicking anything's rear end. I'm just living. And in that, thriving begins. That was my journey. And that's where now it's more about giving the gift of a different view of love and relationship, not my view, but opening that view up for other people so that they can avoid the devastation that abuse brought to my family.
Yeah, awareness is key, right? And so you've spoken to something that is a really, really typical trauma response, which is hypervigilance and hyperintellectualization, right? And so it occurs in so many different ways, and it shows up in so many different ways. And I think also, what do you think about this? That society really encourages us to kind of, like you said, muscle through. And while there is this like wonderful aspect of us being able to have accomplishments and to accomplish things, that at the same time, there's got to be a level of discernment, and there's got to be a harmonious state that occurs, allowing for all things in our lives. And so where I want to be able to kind of help for people who are watching is, where do you find that discernment? And so being able to think about things and understand and learn and kind of go down some of those rabbit holes is great. But when we do it to the extent where we are not connected to our feelings or to our holistic selves, our body, our mind, our spirit, right? Where any of those are disconnected, then we realize that we might need to just pause and allow all of those other aspects of ourselves to catch up, right? And then, and just be okay with it and realize that we can do hard things, we can accomplish things, and we can do incredible things. I mean, I don't know about you, but I think that, the rest is still unwritten with some of the amazing things that we are here to do in this world, right? And I'm here for it. And I can't wait to see what everybody is here to do, which is part of why I love doing the work that I do, because I love to see people succeed. Right. But it's a short game to think that just because we have all of these things at our easy access, right at our fingertips, we have whatever it is that we need, information, we have images that we can create, we have so much. But when we are not in true coherence with all of ourselves and who we are, then basically it's like a bypass. and we end up in places where when we haven't healed some of those things, then we're still carrying those things, right? And they're still with us. They're still present. So what's the answer? The answer is check in with yourself. Make sure you're present, body, mind, spirit, right? And then if you're not, give yourself the time to be able to catch up. And so work with someone, do whatever it is that your self-care practice is, and make sure that you stay on track again. Because that's what makes the difference between, a short little sprint and a long distance.
That's beautiful. Right? I love that. I love the idea too of just letting it all kind of catch up and be one. And I think that's very important. And at the end of it, if we really want to be whole, we can't be afraid of any one of those parts of ourselves. So that's really helpful, really practical. And I think that we need more practicality when it comes to talking about trauma and surviving and the idea. I just feel like we're always pushing people to the thriving, but you just can't get there without the other stuff.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It's just one of those things. It's like the universal law of seasons of change, right? So we have to go through all of the seasons, and we can, like you had said, we can be present and we can be happy and just live in all of those moments. And I think that speaks into acceptance, right? And perfectionism. Oh my gosh. Did you look in my wallet? I have a card that I'm one of the founding members of like perfectionism, right? So perfectionism is another trauma response, right?
Yeah.
And again, one of those things that we're, it doesn't matter where we're from, because, my audience is international. So it doesn't matter where we're from.
Right.
We have this kind of societal programming for things to be perfect. And I mean, what do you think about the aspect of social media and how that kind of primes and promotes that?
So I would say that it's got two sides to it, like everything. I think that what I see, and I actually did a video on this not too long ago, was that I like some of the things I see about, you see women with no makeup. You see young women dressed, not looking to look like every model that walks the runway. I like that aspect. Unfortunately, in doing my research, I also found that it's kind of a surface victory. You've got a few people doing that, but honestly, most people, the millennials, really don't have better body images. And that just broke my heart because it sure looks like they do on social media. So that's just a kind of a side note that I thought was super interesting, was they cast off the image of just love yourself the way they are. They're not necessarily walking it out. So I think that would take us back to probably where we are in this conversation, which is how will we approach social media in a way that it does more good than harm. And I do think it can still do a lot of harm. And one of the things that I have had to deal with is the fact that my perfectionism and my image crafting that I did through a lot of my 20s and 30s, maybe 40s, I don't remember exactly when it stopped, and some days maybe still today, comes from this idea that deep down, I'm yucky. Based on what I've seen, what I've thought, what I've endured, you don't want to see that. Nobody wants to know that me. And I'm slowly getting to the point where I realize we are all feeling that from time to time, and sometimes for years or decades. And now I will say, like I have a husband I'm fortunate to be with for 32 years, and I can tell him, I thought this today. I did this today. I can share that with him. It is a huge step forward from image crafting. And I don't know if that speaks to what you're thinking or.
Oh gosh, yes. Yeah. So, the aspect of our younger hearts, right? The younger individuals that are kind of coming through that have really straddled the innovation and the need for something like social media for connection, because I think that the way that things were going for a lot of younger people, they were so heavily programmed that there was lack of connection. And so social media helped to create and provide that for them. And then in that, whoever was creating the social media were still really wrestling with that idea of perfection, right? And creating the image and the influence of like, this is, the shiny object thing, right? So whatever that shiny object might be. And so even though I think that at the time, those eyes that were watching and consuming this information and consuming the social media probably weren't 100% on board or online with it, they were still consuming it. And we have to metabolize that, right? And so I would see, like you, I would see that there was, like the Snapchatting where, people were taking obscure pictures of like their noses and their ears and like really kind of almost like resisting the system a little bit. Like, I'm not going to take the perfectly curated picture with the whatever. I'm going to take a picture of, something that like shows 3 chins, even though like when I'm just sitting there, I'm not. And yet, they still were consuming all of the other aspects which were perfectly curated, and they needed to metabolize that, and they didn't have the ability to be able to metabolize that. And so I think that that's where that like lack of coherence comes in, right? And younger bodies, younger souls, younger hearts have to be taught how to work through something like that. And we really up until recently didn't have those resources, which is one of the reasons why I love your project. I love doing what I do. And this is why I'm doing these types of videos, and love supporting individuals who put a lot of resources out there, because it just allows them to other maybe fresh eyes or the same eyes to then consume something that they can metabolize and that has a greater state of harmony within them and has a greater state of resonance than something that's harder to achieve or really isn't even real. And being an intuitive as well, I can tell you that I can look and I know that that person's heart is hurting, even though they're on the beach in Cabo and they, look like that, they're driving a Rolls Royce and they have 12 cars in their whatever. Like, I also can see that they're dying inside. And so, but not everybody, but more people than not can see that. And they just don't know how to get right with that. The other aspect of social media, which I really like, is I love the connection, right? So we get to find our people where we may not have been able to find our people in our local communities. So it really did kind of super boost the opportunity for individuals who may not have been able to connect with someone because of, things being redlined or whatever it is, right? Like, there's so much that there has been this kind of sectionality and intersectionality, and I think we still have a long way to go. But that at least it gives the opportunity to be able to connect on common strengths as opposed to dividing because of maybe whatever marginalization it might be, right? And social media then can be taken for what it's meant for, which is connection, and then you take it offline, right?
Well, that's the key. That's one thing that I think in my head about, and like you, I'm a parent of adults now, and what I noticed was they did create something to create connection, but we never had a more isolated population. Yeah. So all this connection was superficial. So we need to remember that if we are going to engage in social media, we need to do what you and I are doing. We need to take it off of that. Oh, I love your picture. I love your post. And I want to hear something real about your life. So when I see your image, I can connect with that. And if we don't do that, then I believe we're really just creating isolation. But I agree with you. I love the idea that I can meet people. I have a very strong belief, a very strong worldview. I love meeting people who don't agree with me. I love meeting people of other socioeconomic groups, other cultures. It makes our world so much warmer. So yes, that part is wonderful.
Yeah. And the more that we can see differences and accept them and embrace them, the more that we can connect, right? Yeah, I love that too. But there's also a biophysical aspect too that happens. and speaking into the whole surviving to thriving aspect, which is that we our brains don't understand the difference between watching something happen and it literally happening.
Right.
And so there is a natural reaction and response that occurs in the physical body, even if somebody is laying down in bed in the dark watching something, right? And so that kicks in the, autonomic nervous system, and then chemicals are released, and we need to be armed with how to then neutralize that and be aware of the two different aspects of how we can be activated, right? Because there's two aspects of survival mode, really. There's the high and then there's the low. And many people don't know when they're in the low aspect of survival, of that survival mechanism, that biophysical survival mechanism that kicks in. Most think about it in that, like, I have to act, I have to run into a burning building, or, the doing aspect. But there's also the other, which is just getting real quiet, real low, not being able to do much, just kind of staying stuck and staying small, and there are different ways to be able to achieve that neutral state again. And which is what we're here to do, which is what we can do, because then from that point, we're able to have a much richer life, and we can actually be more present for all of it, right?
Right.
Which is what we're talking about. Being present.
It's a hard thing to draw that line, because I do believe also that even in the thriving stages of your life, which I feel like that's kind of where I've moved and where things have gone, I still have a desire to make myself small. It's important to be careful to know what is the reason for that. If it's what you're saying, I just want to stay back, I don't want to take risks, I want to be small in the room, that's not a good motivation. I like the idea that I like to let my humility rule. So I like to make myself small so I can see better into other people and learn more. And that's not a bad motivation. And so we got to really get to know ourselves and know why are we making ourselves quiet and small. And that's a really valid and good point.
Yeah. So you're speaking into, like, historically, this is what I used to do, and this is how I used to show up, and I have to be informed of that. Like, I have to know that about myself. Yes. And then, just help to keep myself corralled into the areas where I'm working with my mind, right? And I'm really creating the perception that I know will serve me well from a thriving standpoint, right? So what do you say about, I love the fact that you're like, I'm more in the thriving aspect of my life than the surviving aspect of my life. And, I resonate with that. And I'm happy to hear that for you. But what do you think about just the whole idea of the binary approach to it, which is just like, you go through survival mode and then you go into thriving and then that's it. Like, it's switch on, switch off. Do you find that is it a healthy expectation to think that, once you've mastered something that you'll never have to deal with that again?
I'll just say no.
I'm totally round ball, right?
I can solidly say no. I don't think that would be healthy. I don't think it's a binary thing. I think for me, survival is inherent in every risk I take. Survival is going to come back in quiet voices that I didn't even know that I still recognized or that we're still speaking. So absolutely. When I say I'm thriving, I don't mean I've got everything together and I don't have moments of absolute paralyzing fear or just, I still have that sense of I'm less than. Absolutely. But I think for me, honestly, I finally got to a point where I never got here until my mid-50s, where I just want to find my people. And if I'm not someone's people anymore, I am okay with that for the first time in my life. So I don't need to craft something to get a wider circle. And I think for me, whether it's trauma, whether it's depression or anything else, I think that is really, really crucial. And I think even if you have days, and I had one last week where literally the voices were so loud, I felt like other people in the room could hear them. Like it's just, wow, do I have to push that down? Or when you make a mistake and you immediately say, I'm still that person. And you just go, but wait a minute. No, you've done a lot of work. You're not that same person. You're not image crafting. But sometimes when you get uncomfortable, you do duck into these kinds of things that were mechanisms. Yeah. So yeah, like I love the idea that we are thriving the minute we understand that survival is also a part of thriving.
Yes, right. Exactly. I mean, it's there for a reason. It's there for a reason, but we get to choose how we're going to respond. And oh my gosh, the hearing the loud voices. So part of what happens as a trauma response, and especially when we have experienced it as a young human, is we build up all of these different ways to be able to cope. And then ultimately, especially if we have complex trauma, they can turn into like a defense mechanism. And one of those is that really harsh inner critic. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I've noticed for myself too, right? Where, and I just had an experience happen a couple of weeks ago. And, like I had a car, somebody rear-ended me, and an accident happens, right? Accidents happen. That's why they have the word accident, right? That's why we have insurance and all of this stuff. But for me, and I was great during the accident and everything was great. And the young girl who hit me was like saying, thank you for being so kind. And, so on and so forth. And so an hour after the accident, all of a sudden I noticed voice, inner critic started, right? And it had nothing to do with the accident. It had nothing to do with it. Yet it got louder and it got louder. And then it started to affect the things that I was choosing to do. It was choosing, like it was so subconscious. It was so unconscious. And then it rose into my consciousness to the point where I noticed it. And I said, oh my gosh, wow. I backtracked. I was like, this has been going on for like 15, 20 minutes. And I just wasn't aware of it. And so I had to take a few minutes to really do some work to not to figure out why, because I don't think we always need to know why, but to figure out what I needed in that moment.
Right.
And
love
give it
that.
to myself. Yeah. Yeah.
I call those shower moments too. I have a practice in my life where I've got a lot of things in my life that will pop up and I'll think, oh, that wasn't good. I did that. I shouldn't have done that. Or I shouldn't have thought that. I shouldn't have said that. A lot of them. I don't know if that's normal, but I've had a lot of them. And when they keep coming back to me in the shower, I always give myself a choice. Am I going to do something about this? Am I going to send an apology? Am I going to, but I give it time because sometimes people really don't want to hear from you 15 years later. Just saying. So, but sometimes you need to make apologies. You need to make amends. I'm a big believer in restoration. It's easy to apologize. It's a lot more important to restore. So those are shower moments. And that's kind of like you were going through this moment where it was coming up and then you have to address it. And sometimes that addressing is, I don't need to hear that voice anymore. That voice is not applicable to me anymore. I think that's what you're saying from what I'm hearing.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I just, it feeds into the fact that when we understand that part of living is going to include that we are always going to have these aspects of ourselves and our experiences because of the markers of what has occurred in our lives, then we don't have the shame and we don't carry the resistance to taking a minute and just working it through. I mean, and a real emotion that just comes through. takes about 60 to 90 seconds. 60 to 90 seconds, right?
Wow.
But if we don't allow that emotion to process, then it becomes something that we have trouble metabolizing. And then it starts to affect our thoughts and it starts to affect our physical bodies. And that's what creates that dis-ease, right?
Mhm.
So, and the other thing too that I think is really important is what you said, which is just stop. Because just because we're having a feeling and just because we're having a thought doesn't mean that it's true.
Right. Right.
Right?
Mhm.
So, and even if it may be a little true, it doesn't mean that it's always true, right? And we tend to catastrophize things. That's also part of a defense mechanism is we tend to catastrophize things, right?
Yes.
So then, and then that derails us, right? And that can derail us really quickly.
Yes.
And it can turn into even like delusional thinking and all of our other defense mechanisms can come into play as well. So yeah, I mean, I love that we're speaking into all these aspects because I haven't so far with all of the beautiful guests that I've had, and I love that we're covering this because it's really important to understand and to remind yourself every single day that we get to continue to visit parts of ourselves that have been with us all along this journey, but we may not have actually like sat and had tea with and been like, oh, hmm.
And giving ourselves some grace, Sharon. I think I'm so quick to give other people's grace for some heinous things and so slow to give myself grace for being young or not being comfortable in my own skin or not being nice enough or being too judgmental or those things are part of a journey of humility and knowledge and knowing and feeling. And we all go through them. So why do we often have such a higher standard for ourselves than we would for anybody else?
Yeah. We must allow space for ourselves. We must allow ourselves to be in this space.
Yeah.
And you've spoken about humility a couple of times, and I love, love, love the fact that that's part of what you bring every single time you enter a space energetically or otherwise. And that really speaks to my heart for sure. Was humility a challenge for you to be able to incorporate?
But it's part of my worldview, remaining humble, servant heart, things like that. Yeah, it is because when you puff yourself up to make yourself look a certain way, humility doesn't come natural, and so it's been a part of my healing process, I think. So when you think you have to have certain things or say certain things or be certain things for people, then when someone threatens that, you feel like the whole facade's going to just crash on the ground and they're going to be stuck with the real you, which is a scary thought, right? So humility for me has been letting people see the cracks and saying, that doesn't mean I don't have something to offer. So that's kind of been my genesis of that. And it is a big deal for me because I don't know that without humility, I would have the ability to read into the way we approach love and relationship, which is my passion, with room for the fact that I don't have it all figured out. I just know certain things are really dangerous. And that has opened up my ability to help people that maybe I wouldn't share a lot of other views. I got a DM yesterday from someone I really respect and admire, and she does great writing. And when she says, your words have helped me get through something or change the trajectory of certain things, my first reaction is, yeah, good. And my second reaction is, wow, am I honored to get to be part of the path from wisdom to their ears. I'm just part of that path. That is not my wisdom. So that to me is, I think the minute that I stop really cultivating humility, I might stop being very useful.
Really powerful. That's really powerful. realizing that we are just an instrument, right? And that, humility is exactly as you said. It's not self-deprecation. It's not putting yourself down.
Right.
As much as it also isn't, we're all special, yet we all have something special to give. We all have something special to offer.
Yeah.
You are exceptionally special. At the same time, though, we can be useful if we have humility.
Right.
Right?
That opens up that gamut for us. And if we don't carry that, I think you'll notice that it is more about what we project and less about the substance behind it. And that's what I've noticed in social media is that, and it's not a judgment. I'm not saying that they don't have good intentions. I'm just saying there are some people who I really feel like I'm a means to an end more than an individual. And that to me is a sign of a lack of humility, really. And that's not a judgment. Like I said, I'm not saying I don't think they're good people. I'm just saying I think maybe somewhere along the lines, if I lose that at any point, I'm probably more in it for how I look. And I don't want to be in it for that. I've got too many other things that fill my life. If I can't make an impact, I can get a job, a job outside of this realm. So, let's do some good here.
Yeah, I completely agree. And someone who I know that Aziza, she and I did an interview together, and she had asked me a question. I said, it's really interesting. I realized that part of what I had to do in order to really make the next step was I had to get over myself. And it wasn't about me thinking that I was too good for or, anything really super special, but I had to get over my own pain points, right? So anything that points to pain aversion is the ego, right? Yeah. So I really, I realized that there were things that I had to kind of work through and heal for myself to be able to really be that pure, empty vessel, to be the instrument, right? And and to do it in a way where it was more public, because like you, I definitely have that default, which is just be a little more quiet, be the one that's kind of behind the bush whispering out whatever it is that the person out front should be saying, So to actually be in front of in the light is it was something that I had to work towards, right? And it's a constant process for me. I was listening to someone speak, and they said, that you should look for a bright place to stand when you go to say something impactful. And I was my inside, there was this little young piece of me that was just oh no, And I thought, yeah, that's really interesting. There's still a little bit there, right? So it just means that we get to love ourselves more and understand and support and care for ourselves more, which is that inner child work. And also just practice humility, which is you're showing other people all of the good, all of the things that they may or may not need to hear. And you can do it in a way where you're not attached to the outcome.
Right. No expectation. And I think for me, the whole vessel point is I'm just taking the gifts that have been given to me and finding other ways to get them to somebody else. So really, that's where the ego can't really grow. There's no place for ego in that. I just get to pass it from here to here. And that's a blessing. That's a blessing that I get to see people change things that makes their heart safer. That's gift. And that to me, I think as long as we remember that along the process, I think that's part of our healing. That's part of our thriving, is that it isn't about self-depreciation. I love that. No, I have to make jokes, I'm too old to be starting this. I don't have enough, stuff for my face to make myself look 30 anymore. But I have those jokes, but in my heart of hearts, I do fully believe that wisdom is something that exists. And if we don't find new ways to spread it, then it'll only reach so many ears. So humility is the knowledge that I have gotten to a point where I can recognize it and I can pass it. That's huge. That's huge.
Yeah, it really is. It's incredible. And as we're talking, I'm thinking, I want to give like the sign like to two rockin' women in their 50s, Woo! Yeah, like it's wonderful, and and that's what I love to see, and I want to see more of just everyone stepping out and really being able to to help others, right? Um, so I've loved this conversation so much. I wanted to ask you if there was anything that you felt was really important to share, like that you wish that you had known, or when it comes to kind of going into that thriving state, anything that you feel is impactful that you'd like to leave our listeners with.
Sure. So I think one of the main things that I'm passionate about is how much of our human experience is based on what people will say about us, to us. And for me, one of the linchpins of developing and building thriving lives and thriving healthy relationships is just that shift to the knowledge that words really are only as important as what character and intentionality feed into them. So for us to build a life that is thriving, like we said before, not perfectly thriving, still going to have survival pieces. Every single one of us, I've yet to meet the person without trauma or pain. Then we're going to have to really be able to identify and lean into the concept of words have to be backed with character and intention, and it has to be expressed as an action and not as a feeling. I love feelings. I think it's great. They're important. They're an important part of our humanity. Definitely wouldn't want to eradicate that. But I think we really lead with our feelings sometimes. And we need to, when it comes to protecting our heart, we also have to realize that other people can really manipulate us with words. And I think part of thriving for me has been looking at love as a verb. What are they doing? And what promises are they actually keeping? So when I see that, I see growth in me, because I think I used to believe the words a whole lot more. And feelings are lovely, but I don't think they're a good thing to follow when it comes to making a choice in a partner. So I think it could really set you up for suffering. So I don't know if that ties it in pretty well for you, but I think that's probably one of my main things is if we can get into the hands of people that just that shift, that love is a verb, that words should not be the end all. And at the end of the day, let your love be what you do with feelings attached, not the other way around.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That's really, really powerful. So words plus actions
Right.
equal truth. Right.
And I would say action plus words.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks it's, like the love is feelings and, actions. And it's like, I think it's just turn it upside down. Just turn it upside down. It's what they do and the way that you feel. Honestly, after being married 32 years, is going to go like this, beautifully back and forth. And that's not a bad thing or a negative thing. I'm not anti-fairy tale. I'm not anti-love. I'm simply let the feelings be the icing and let the actions be the cake.
Let the feelings be the action and the icing be the cake. I'm sorry, I just said that totally wrong. That's my dyslexia.
To catch it too.
Yes, actually. Say it again. Let the feelings
be the icing. That's why I think you said that. Let the feelings be the icing. So it's like the yummy, sweet part of a relationship, friendship, intimate, whatever. Mm-hmm. And then the cake is what they do. And it's the basis of it. Right. Without the cake, you just put the icing on the cardboard. It's not going to be there. So you need to have the reality of the relationship be the cake. And I think we're raising generations to see it the other way around, that it happens to you, how will we ever thrive and survive if we literally don't understand the difference between what life is and what we want it to be. And that's what we do, I think. I think we raise generations to think, go for the feeling. Well, maybe the feeling will get you into serious diabetic coma. I mean, maybe that icing's going to take you out.
Yeah, I'm 100% on board with that, because I think that we can feel a lot in our lifetime, and we can even dream a lot. And we need to allow for all of those things. But if we don't take action, then we'll never achieve our destiny.
No.
Without a plan and without action, we have no intentionality, and we're basically going to be bouncing around behind whatever other current we're caught by, right?
So good. Yes. And make sure that you like the cake. Make sure that when it comes to your life, you like what's happening. You like, it could be mixed, but you like what's going on in your life, and stop basing it on the sweet moments, because life is wonderful. And I do believe in fairy tales. I believe that you're the author of your own fairy tale. And so choices and those things. And I just don't think we say that enough. And I think that's a big piece. I think we have a lot of suffering because of that.
Yeah, no, and I definitely, coming from your lens and from the perspective of sparing young hearts and really teaching about that. I think that is just so perfect and very, very poignant. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for coming here. I just love connecting with you, whether it's in Clubhouse or in our little snippets that we're able to, send voice notes to one another, and definitely through all of the work that you do and your YouTube videos. It's always just so incredible to share time, to share conversation, and to share our space and energy together. And I just want to thank you for coming to this side of YouTube and being part of this conversation. And I hope you'll come back again. I'm really excited for. Yeah,
I would love to. I've loved it, Sharon. I love what you bring to the world, and I love the things that I learn when we talk. And I'm so grateful for your heart, and it's very mutual.
Yeah, thank you again. And I'm going to put in the information below, all of your contact information, so you can find Kimie of Worth the War on Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Stitcher and Twitter and all of those great things. And I'll leave all the links below. So Kimie, thanks again. So much love to you. And until the next time.
Lovely.
All right.